Hey there everyone, Weeb here, and welcome back to Remember Mii, a series of reviews/retrospectives where I highlight, reminisce, and celebrate a variety of titles from Nintendo Wii's library. With there being many games that are obscure, or maybe some of you have never even heard of before, I hope to bring these games forward in order for them to not be forgotten. With that being said, let's get started with today's episode about a strange game called Silent Hill Shattered Memories that plays you as much as you play it. Now, this may come as a surprise to some of you, but once upon a time, Konami actually made games. Yes, before they were up to their necks in patchy slots, Konami was the beloved company behind such series as Metal Gear, Castlevania, Bomberman, and of course, Silent Hill. First released in 1999 for the PlayStation, Silent Hill was a survivor horror title that really differentiated itself from the competition like, say, Resident Evil, by focusing not on a combat-trained protagonist, but instead an everyman named Harry Mason, who gets caught in a situation way over his head, when the search for his daughter in the eponymous town brings him face to face with a cult trying to revive an eldritch deity.
I'm too old for this shit.
Needless to say, Silent Hill is a success, and even considered by some to be one of the greatest video game titles of all time. Naturally, this spawned a franchise with acclaimed titles Silent Hill 2, Silent Hill 3, and Silent Hill 4 The Room, following soon after. Jump forward to 2008, and it is around this point in time that our story properly begins, as not only had the Silent Hill series been recently handed over to Climax Action, a British development studio, but the 10th anniversary of the original Silent Hill's release was soon approaching. Now, while director Sam Barlow wanted to create a new title on the PSP, Konami instead suggested creating one on Nintendo Wii, especially since no Silent Hill title had been exclusively released on a Nintendo platform before. This led to the first draft for the new game, a spin-off title called Bram's PD, that would have followed an amnesiac police detective searching for his partner. Gameplay would have consisted of first-person shooting, as well as featuring interactive sessions with a police psychiatrist. This project did not receive Konami's approval, however, and was soon abandoned. The next draft for the game kept the psychological profiling, but dropped pretty much all else. Called Silent Hill Cold Heart, this title would have been an official installment to the franchise, and followed a 19-year-old college student named Jessica Chambers, who suffered from depression and studied psychology. Gameplay would have consisted of melee combat, as well as a body temperature mechanic that would have seen the player scavenging for resources in order to stay warm. Like the previous title, it would have involved some sort of psych profile system, this time from therapy sessions with Jessica's therapist named Dr. Alan Fairchild. Unfortunately, Climax didn't believe that this title would convince Konami either, so they also quietly dropped the idea. They say third time's a charm, and it definitely seems like the third idea was the one to finally stick. Going back to an old idea that Konami had themselves suggested at one point, Climax finally decided on focusing their project on a reimagining of the first game. Taking the original story as a starting point, they then added new elements to it such as falling snow to reduce visibility instead of fog, an emphasis on scenario instead of combat, and of course, the therapy sessions so each player would have a unique psych profile when playing. Though the game's release got pushed back a few times, it eventually released for the Wii in 2009, as well as PSP and PS2 in 2010. When it comes to the plot, the game begins just as the original, with protagonist Harry Mason crashing his car in Silent Hill and scrambling to find his missing daughter. However, as the near-amnesiac Harry journeys through town, the plot branches out in various ways, with the personalities and roles of characters differing, as well as the introduction of new characters. Gameplay is broken up into 3 sections. In the first, the player interacts with a therapist named Dr. Michael Kaufman from a first-person perspective. During these therapy sessions, the player responds to Kaufman's questions, fills in a questionnaire, colors pictures, or does other exercises related to topics such as high school, guilt, or death. The player's responses to these tests alter aspects of gameplay in the second setting, including the available areas, the physical appearances and behavior of characters encountered, and the physical appearance of the monsters. The player returns to Kaufman's office periodically throughout the game. In the second setting of gameplay, the player guides Harry Mason in a third-person over-the-shoulder view as he searches for his missing daughter Cheryl in the snowy town of Silent Hill. Equipped with a smartphone and flashlight, Harry can use the phone to check his GPS, take pictures, view documents, listen to voice messages, and make telephone calls. Throughout his journey, Harry encounters all manner of puzzles that utilize the Wii Remote's motion controls in various ways. Going to certain spots with high interference, represented by a lot of radio noise, or by taking pictures of spots where shadowy figures can be seen, unlock various text and voicemail messages that expand the story and occasionally provide clues. In some instances, players may need to connect all these mechanics together to progress. For instance, taking a picture of a shadowy figure, which then unlocks a voicemail message, when listened to then gives a clue, that the player then uses to interact with something in the overworld. In this section of gameplay, exploration is key. And it's interesting to note that while therapy sessions affect things in the overworld Harry inhabits, the player's behavior affects things as well. Looking repeatedly at alcoholic imagery, for instance, leads down a certain personality path. Finally, in the third section of gameplay, the game occasionally shifts to an icy alternate dimension called Nightmare, where hostile monsters called Raw Shocks exist. To escape, Harry must make his way to a predetermined exit while avoiding the wandering creatures that hunt him down. Harry is weaponless, and there's no combat element to the gameplay. Instead, the player can only run, hide, slow down monsters by knocking down objects to block their path, throw off creatures if they latch onto him, and temporarily ward them off by using flares found in certain parts of the level. As the game progresses, these nightmare sections become more complex, also throwing in certain puzzles that need to be solved in order to escape. Like many Silent Hill games, there are multiple endings that can be unlocked. Depending on the player's psych profile, 5 endings are available, including a UFO ending, which is a recurring joke in the series. Upon release, Silent Hill Shattered Memories seemed to do quite well for itself, managing to break even in sales and gain attention from several reviewers who deemed it things like innovative, nerve-shredding, and even overlooked. Unfortunately, this did little to help the series as a whole, as it never did return to its previous level of success, with several mediocre titles souring fans on the franchise, and the cancellation of the highly anticipated Silent Hills serving as the last nail in the coffin from which the series still remains lifeless. At least the developers of Shattered Memories seem to make it out okay, with Climax Action, under the larger umbrella of Climax Studios, sticking to a number of ports and VR titles since then. Now, I always like to discuss how easy it is to get your hands on whatever game I cover here on Remember Mii, and Silent Hill Shattered Memories really depends on what version you're trying to pick up. To give a quick rundown, there's the Wii version, which has been the main focus of this episode, as well as a PSP and PS2 port. Personally, I think the Wii version is the best out of the 3, due to having the best graphics and having the greatest immersion due to the whole Wiimote gimmick. However, the other 2 titles still each have their own positives, like the PSP version providing portability, and the PS2 version sticking to more traditional controls. When it comes to trying to buy any of these titles on something like eBay, the Wii and PSP version are similar in that they have quite a few copies available, around the $50 to $80 mark. That's about the cost of a new game, and not too shabby if you're interested in such a unique title, I think. The PS2 version, on the other hand, is where things escalate, with copies starting at around $100 and just going up from there. Definitely cool as a collector's item, but those prices are a bit hard to swallow for what is arguably the inferior version. To this day, Silent Hill Shattered Memories still has quite a following, with those that know about it remembering it fondly, and those who are just discovering it, quite curious to experience it for themselves. While it may not be as beloved as the first few entries in the series, it still does plenty of interesting things that help it stand out, especially among the Wii's more family-friendly titles. Heck, the fact that many fans consider it to be one of the better non-Team Silent titles is also quite an accomplishment. Atmospheric, creepy, and interesting to explore, I hope this is a title that reaches out to all of you watching and says, "Remember me." If you know any other Wii games that would be a great fit for the series, let me know in the comments below, or feel free to hit me up over on Twitter. Until next time, keep those tails fluffy and your ears clean.